This video, which is an introductory lecture for Module 2, talks about the relationship between property rights and efficiency.
By property rights in economics, we refer to something very specific. That is, it's the bundle of rights associated with a piece of property. And the three characteristics of property rights on which we're going to focus are transferability, enforceability, and exclusivity. By transferability, we mean if the owner has the asset, they can transfer that to somebody else. They can give it away, they can sell it. They have the ability to transfer the asset and all of the associated benefits or cost to someone else. Right? Enforceability means that if you've got it, you own it. And those benefits associated with that asset and the costs associated with owning the asset are enforced by law or are secure to you as the owner. Finally, we focus, and we're going to focus a lot on this property in our course, is the property of exclusivity. And that means that all of the benefits and costs accrue, that is, fall on only the owner of the asset. So if I buy a box of cereal, I get to enjoy the pleasures of eating my Cheerios. No one else gets the benefits associated with the Cheerios if I put them into my mouth. Now, as we'll see, these properties end up having incredibly important impacts on our notion of economic efficiency. So let's just consider the basic supply and demand curve that probably most of you have seen before many times. We know that the demand curve can become derived from the marginal willingness to pay curve. So if a consumer sees a particular price, they're going to want to consume that quantity. And you'll remember exercises that we've done in class that talked about that. So if you had a price, how many minutes of showers would you be willing to purchase? That's going to determine the demand curve. So demand curve reflects, it's a mapping, we say in mathematical terms, a function where you look at a price and you get a quantity. The same happens on the supply side. So if a firm sees a particular price, the marginal cost curve is going to tell us how many units of that the firm would be willing to supply. So if you've got the marginal cost curve, you also have the supply curve in the simplest model, where you look at a price and that tells you the quantity that are supplied. Equilibrium in an economic model is associated with the point where the supply equals demand, and that's going to determine our market level price and our market level quantity. If you have efficient property rights, the benefits that fall on the consumer are what we call a consumer surplus, and that's the area underneath the marginal willingness to pay curve or the demand curve, all right, minus what the consumer has to pay, which is going to be the price times the quantity. This is the surplus that goes to the consumers or the purchasers in this market. All right. The producers also get benefits from participation in the market, and they're going to get, by selling their goods, they're going to be able to sell at a particular price, and they're going to get revenue equal to the price times the quantity, but they do have to pay costs, and as we've seen, the cost is equal to the area underneath the marginal cost curve. So if you take this rectangle and you subtract this area here, you're left with the producer surplus, which is the benefits that fall on the producers. The area consumer surplus plus the producer surplus are the welfare gains that are achieved by the market. And this is the basic story that Adam Smith talked about hundreds of years ago. That is, that the markets lead to an efficient allocation of goods. And so the producer surplus plus consumer surplus is maximizing the benefits that are possible under the conditions of having this particular demand curve coming from a marginal willingness to pay curve and this particular supply curve that comes from a marginal cost curve. And that's why Adam Smith is happy, all right, because the surplus has been maximized. Now let's think carefully about how these three property rights lead to the efficient outcome. Let's look first at the idea of transferability. Well, transferability means that the sellers of this good have the ability to transfer that a unit, as many units as they want, from the producers of the good to the buyers of the good. So you can think about transferability as making possible this welfare gain. If I take this unit of good that it cost me this many dollars to produce, and I transfer it to the buyer of the good, the buyer is going to get these benefits, I'm going to get these costs. Transferability is essentially creating, you can think about painting in the surplus that is created by the market activity. All right, so transferability leads to the creation of the marginal gains from each unit that is transferred. Notice that we don't transfer beyond the point where the market equilibrium is, because the costs to the producer are greater than the benefits to the consumers for any units past QM. All right. The next characteristic of efficient property rights that we're going to focus on is the idea of enforceability. So enforceability is critical, obviously, to market activities. If a owner of a resource doesn't have, if their rights are not enforced, they're not going to be willing to produce and sell the good. All right. The only reason that the individual is willing to produce this good and pay costs is because they know that the only conditions under which they are going to sell it is if somebody pays them some price for that good. So if while let's say that the firm produced this unit at that marginal cost and the consumer could benefit from it at that marginal cost, if the consumer could get it for free by simply walking up and stealing it away, then obviously the consumer would do that, and the producer would say, well, I don't get anything out of this, and therefore I'm not going to participate in this market activity anymore. If that's the case, then even though there are benefits to be achieved by society, the benefits will not be achieved because the producers are not going to produce the good. The final condition of efficient property rights that we're going to focus on is the idea of exclusivity. By exclusivity, we mean that the owner of the good has the exclusive benefits of receiving it. So if you think about some person here, they're going to pay that price because they get the benefits. They're going to pay some price, let's say this, because they get the benefits from consuming the good. If I could get those benefits after somebody else purchased the good, then I'd probably be less inclined to do it. And that gives rise to what we call the free rider problem. There's also cases of costs that are imposed that are non-exclusive, and those are what we call the externalities, and we're going to focus more specifically on those in a separate video. All right, so I'm just going to close this quick video on the idea of noting that Adam Smith is happy. All right. Notice his smile here, because consumer surplus plus producer surplus maximizes the net benefits possible to society through the production of this good. Those benefits are made possible by a market exchange that depends upon transferability to transfer the asset from the producer to the consumer, by enforceability, by saying the only way this consumer is going to get it is if he pays a price, let's say PM here, and by exclusivity, by saying I'm going to get those benefits only if I pay for it, and not if somebody else pays for it and gets the benefits too, because